After 7 years as a stand-in, Marcus's one that got away finally returned to the. I took a hefty severance package and left the country overnight. The one that got away's wedding caused quite a stir. In a press interview, Marcus looked into the camera and said, "I'm waiting for someone." Waiting for whom, exactly? I switched off the TV and pushed the stroller. "Stella, mommy's taking you outside to see the snow." Before we continue, subscribe to our channel and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Marcus's car pulled up in front of me just as I was leaving the library, lugging 2 thick textbooks. The evening sun was a bit blinding, making his black Bentley gleam. The car window slid down, revealing Marcus's face. Back then, he was leaner than he is now, with deep-set eyes that always held a look of weariness and scrutiny. He looked at me, his gaze intense. "Get in." His voice was low, slightly hoarse. Clutching my books, I instinctively took half a step back. My exams were coming up soon. This person, this face, this car. They all felt too distant from my world, which was filled with cafeteria food smells and final paper stress. "Where are we going?" I asked dryly. He furrowed his brow slightly, as if he found the question unnecessary. "Just get in first." I opened the back door. The car started, merging into traffic. He drove in silence, his gaze occasionally falling on me. But I knew he wasn't really seeing me. Marcus needed a shadow. And I, coincidentally, was caught in his gaze that evening. Marcus and I first met during my sophomore year. I was a girl fresh out of a small town, a bit unsophisticated. I'd finally made it to the wide-open city. I worked part-time jobs whenever I had a moment, finally earning some money. After tuition and fees, I spent the rest on improving my appearance. In just 1 year, I truly underwent a complete transformation. I'd always known I was pretty. The makeup and nice clothes simply helped enhance my natural beauty. They were just the icing on the cake. Returning to school after my afternoon part-time job, Marcus's car brushed past me. I didn't think anything of it and kept walking. The next second, a strong force grabbed me. A man's hand clamped tightly around my arm. I turned and saw Marcus. I fell for him at first sight. Those first 2 years were like a carefully woven dream. He took me to a private equestrian club, and when I slid off the horse's back, he'd catch me steadily, his arms strong and firm. He rented out the top floor of a revolving restaurant just so I could watch the city lights bloom. Expensive jewelry, limited edition bags. They were delivered to me as if they were worthless candy. He taught me wine tasting, sent me flowers. I admit, for someone as inexperienced as I was, all of it was incredibly tempting. I completely fell for him. I thought it was love. I thought I was Marcus's salvation. I'd heard he once had a very bad relationship experience. Until that night. He came back from a work event, having drunk too much. His expensive suit jacket was carelessly tossed on the carpet, his tie loosened, revealing his Adam's apple. The air was thick with the scent of liquor and cigars. He pulled me into his arms with great force. His burning lips pressed against mine haphazardly, leaving no room for resistance. The main lights in the room were off, only a floor lamp in the corner cast a dim, ambiguous glow. Everything was as usual. We clung to each other without restraint. Our bodies had a fatal attraction to each other. Physical attraction? Just before my consciousness completely succumbed, I heard a name. I knew there was such a girl, but in Marcus's circle, everyone tacitly avoided mentioning her, afraid of crossing Marcus's line. So, I only learned her name for the first time from him directly. Eleanor. Eleanor. The woman who loomed in his past, said to be breathtakingly beautiful and to have left Marcus. Time suddenly pressed the pause button. His hot breath was still on my neck, and his large hands were clamped tightly around my waist. But my body had gone completely cold. My heart slowly sank with it. I pushed him away. Marcus, completely unprepared, swayed and fell back onto the wide couch. He didn't seem to have fully disengaged from his delusion. His eyes were half closed, and he looked at me with the displeasure of someone whose sleep had been disturbed. His gaze was unfocused. I couldn't tell if he was looking at me or Eleanor. I felt such humiliation. This was my first time being in a relationship, and I thought he loved me. Yet, he was calling out another woman's name in bed. My heart was shattered. A burning sensation rushed to my eyes and nose. I bit my lower lip hard, forcefully suppressing an overwhelming sense of despair. I couldn't cry. Not in front of him. Especially not because of this. I unilaterally chose to end the intimacy that night. I turned and walked to the huge floor-to-ceiling window. Outside, the city's neon lights never faded. If it weren't for Marcus, I doubted I would ever see such prosperity in my life. I fumbled for his cigarette pack and lighter on the small side table. My hands were trembling slightly, it took 2 tries to light the cigarette. The acrid smoke filled my lungs, making me cough, and tears finally streamed down my face uncontrollably. Not out of sadness, but a physiological reaction. I vigorously wiped them away with my hand. The window pane reflected the silent, handsome man on the couch. I looked at my reflection in the glass, watching the pathetic wetness slowly dry. Finally, I watched the churning emotions in my eyes gradually subside. In my second year with Marcus, I decided I wouldn't love him anymore. But I also wasn't willing to give up his circle, his social standing. After that night, Marcus seemed completely oblivious. He still sent me gifts and took me to places ordinary people couldn't reach. But I had already started to withdraw all my attention from him. I learned to calculate precisely, calculating the monetary value of each of his gifts. When a spacious penthouse apartment with river views in the city center was put in my name, I clung to him, acting sweet and appreciative as I thanked him. Then I immediately looked up the latest transaction prices for properties in the same area. A pigeon's blood ruby necklace, acquired from a top auction house, felt heavy around my neck. I only wore it when accompanying him to essential events, locking it immediately in the safe afterward. Estimating its future appreciation potential. The limited edition bags piled high, covering an entire wall of the walk-in closet, their tags still attached. Marcus was increasingly pleased with how well behaved I was. Because I used to throw tantrums with him often, complaining that he didn't like me enough, or that he had late replies to messages. But those situations hadn't occurred for a long time now. He stroked my head and said I was a good girl. During this period, I was busy with my graduation thesis. He was also getting busier and busier. Sometimes, we wouldn't see each other even once a week. His occasional visits felt more like completing an obligation. Like now, after getting into the car, we didn't have much else to talk about. We drove straight to our destination. Afterward, I went to wash up. When I came out, Marcus was already looking at documents. I picked up the hairdryer, ready to dry my hair. He was like a radar. As soon as he heard the sound, he got up. He naturally took the hairdryer and helped me dry my hair. In the past, these small gestures of his would often make my heart flutter. But now, my heart was completely calm. Isn't this what he should do? After my hair was dry, he put his arm around my waist, resting his chin on my shoulder and neck. Why don't you stay tonight? We haven't seen each other in a while. A while? I thought it had only been a week. But I didn't say it. My final exams are comin'. Gee up. He rubbed his stubble against me. It's fine, my driver will take you back first thing in the morning. Okay. He went back to dealing with his work. I also picked up the 2 thick textbooks I'd borrowed from the library to study. Sometimes, when I looked up and saw him, I couldn't help but feel a sense of warmth. I'd also subconsciously wonder if he'd be like this when he eventually got married. Marcus was 30 this year, almost. As I thought about it, my reason returned. I silently slapped myself mentally. None of your business. In the blink of an eye, I had been by Marcus's side for 7 years. When I graduated, he insisted I work at the company. I refused. That would be too restrictive. Sweetie, distance makes the heart grow fonder. If you saw me every day, you'd definitely get tired of me. My excuse actually managed to appease Marcus. He readily agreed, and let me go work as a translator at another company. In the autumn of the 7th year, the air began to carry a desolate chill. Marcus's one that got away finally returned. The news, like a stone, instantly sent ripples through Marcus's social circle. I saw her photo in a financial news alert. She stood on the opening red carpet of an international exhibition, wearing a sharply tailored black gown, her smile bright and confident. I had to admit, Marcus's taste was impeccable. A woman of Eleanor's caliber. It was no wonder Marcus hadn't been able to let her go for 10 years. If I were him, I wouldn't have been able to either. Once, when I went to see Marcus, I overheard David ask him, "What exactly is Grace's magic, that she's kept you tied down for 7 years?" Marcus took a drag from his cigarette, seeming genuinely thoughtful. "She's very well behaved." David scoffed, "Isn't it because she looks a third like her?" I didn't hear a reply. My first reaction at the time was, I only look a third like her, and I'm this good looking, so how stunning must Eleanor be? I was actually quite curious. After returned, Marcus changed almost immediately. He became distracted. He cancelled our planned trip to Switzerland for skiing. He didn't even offer a perfunctory explanation, just had his assistant send me a text message. The air freshener in his apartment was replaced with a colder cedar scent. It wasn't a scent I liked. He started frequently forgetting small things about me. Like the niche play I'd casually mentioned wanting to see. Like my dietary restrictions during my cycle. Once, when I had a fever of 39 degrees Celsius, I groggily sent him a text. A full day passed before I received a formulaic reply from his assistant: "Mr. Marcus is busy. Ms. Grace, please take care of yourself." Looking at that message, I actually found it a little funny. Alright. The original partner was back, and even the stand-in's life or death seemed utterly irrelevant. Good thing I'd always known this day would come, otherwise I'd probably be heartbroken. The day Eleanor came directly to my door was a gloomy afternoon. The doorbell rang just as I finished a video translation meeting. I was wearing loose loungewear, my hair casually tied up. I opened the door to see her standing outside. I was both surprised and not surprised. Surprised that someone as insignificant as me was worth her personal visit. Not surprised that these past 7 years had perhaps genuinely increased my value. Her carefully drawn eyebrows and eyes held scrutiny as she looked me up and down, as if appraising the quality of an object. She carried a faint cedar scent. Finally, having seen enough, she actually let out a small laugh. Her tone was languid and casual. "Grace?" I stepped aside to let her in. "Ms. Eleanor, please come in." She didn't sit. Her heels clicked sharply on the polished floor. The sound was particularly jarring in the empty living room. She walked to the enormous floor-to-ceiling window, looking at the skyline outside, her back to me. "You're probably aware of what happened between Marcus and me." Her tone was as flat as if she were discussing the weather. "I was too young back then, and I wronged Marcus. Some regrets just have to be rectified." I stood silently behind her. She turned, taking a slip of paper from her expensive handbag. She gracefully placed it on the coffee table nearby, pushing it towards me. A check. The number on it was followed by a string of zeros. "Marcus is sentimental. For these 7 years, thank you for your care. She deliberately emphasized the word care, a hint of mockery playing on her lips. "Consider this gesture of appreciation a thank you gift. Take it, and go live your own life. From now on, you won't need to trouble yourself with Marcus." I stared at the string of numbers, enough for an ordinary person to squander for several lifetimes. My heart felt like it had been struck heavily, a dull ache. But strangely, it didn't hurt much. Instead, there was a sense of relief, as if the dust had finally settled. This actress of mine had finally received her cue to exit the stage, complete with a generous payment. I looked up, meeting Eleanor's scrutinizing gaze. In her eyes, there was the certainty of a victor, and also a hint of nervousness. I suddenly pulled back the corners of my mouth, giving her a genuinely sincere smile. "Ms. Eleanor, you're too kind." I reached out, picked up the check, folded it carefully, and put it into the pocket of my loungewear. "Don't worry, I pack quickly. From now on, Mr. Marcus will be returned to his rightful owner." Eleanor seemed not to have expected me to be so agreeable. A flicker of surprise crossed her eyes. After seeing my guest out, I gave myself a pep talk. "Time to get busy. It looks like I'll have a lot to do these next few days." In the days that followed, I was like a highly efficient machine. I contacted a real estate agent and listed the spacious penthouse apartment with river views for sale. The price was slightly below market value, with only one condition: full payment, as soon as possible. I contacted auction houses, packing all the jewelry, luxury watches I'd rarely worn from the safe, and the mountains of luxury bags in the walk-in closet with their tags still on, sending them all to be appraised and listed for auction. The car Marcus had given me was also quickly sold off through a reliable used car dealership. With each payment that hit my account, I felt an added layer of security. When the final auction payment came in, I looked at the 9-digit balance displayed on my mobile banking app. My hands couldn't help but tremble. 100 million. And 3 million. Holy crap, I'm rich. The final settlement for my 7 years of youth. A definite profit. Marcus's calls came in frantically during this time. My phone screen lit up repeatedly. I didn't block him, I just let it ring until it ran out of battery and turned itself off. His messages, from the initial question "Where are you?" to the later "Answer your phone," and finally, with a hint of barely perceptible panic, "Grace, let's talk." I didn't open a single one. I just watched the number of unread messages accumulate, like a pile of meaningless symbols. By the time he found the apartment, I had already moved out all my inexpensive belongings. The real estate agent was showing the apartment to a new buyer. He stood in the empty space, his expensive suit making his figure seem somewhat frail. His face held a look of panic and fury I'd never seen before. "Grace!" He rushed towards me in a few strides, his breathing uneven, his eyes bloodshot. "What do you mean by this? Who gave you permission to sell the apartment? And all those things? Mr. Marcus, I calmly interrupted him, my tone distant. The apartment and those things, the title deeds are all in my name. I have the right to dispose of them. I held up the warm copy of the transfer documents I had just signed with the buyer. He seemed choked, staring at my rising and falling chest. Aner came to see you? She gave you money? Was it all just for money? Ms. Eleanor did give me a check, she was very generous. I calmly took out a copy of the check from my bag and handed it to him. But, Marcus, what I sold were the things you gave me over the past 7 years. At market value, it's roughly 100 million, a little more. This money is perfectly clean. He glanced at the numbers on the copy, his face instantly turning grim. He grabbed my wrist, his grip alarmingly strong. Grace, stop messing around. Come back with me. I'll handle Eleanor. Marcus, I forcefully pulled my hand away, looking with some displeasure at the red marks on my wrist. I looked up, and when I saw the anger and bewilderment in his eyes, I felt an incredible sense of satisfaction. We're over. It ended 5 years ago, the moment you called out Eleanor in my bed. Now, I'm just formally informing you. His pupils sharply contracted, the color draining from his face. He seemed to want to say something, his lips moving a few times, but not a single word came out. I wish you. I paused, looking at his suddenly pale face, and ultimately left the second half of the sentence, and Ms. Eleanor a lifetime of happiness, unsaid. Forget it. What's the point? I gave him a slight nod, picked up the carry-on suitcase at my feet, and didn't look back. The international departure hall of the airport was brightly lit. I pulled out my passport and a brand new plane ticket, my destination, the distant Nordic country of Norway. Eleanor had just returned from there. As for why I chose Norway, well, there's a story behind that. Because had refused Marcus entry. Back then, he and Eleanor had caused such a sensational scene in Norway, even involving the local police, leaving him with a bad record. The romantic land of ice and snow had been closed off to him ever since. See? Everyone comes from their younger days. How is it that their relationships were always so dramatic? I handed my passport and plane ticket to the customs officer. After checking them, the officer smiled and stamped my exit stamp. Enjoy your trip, madam. Thank you. The engine emitted a low hum, marking the beginning of my new life. I found my seat, by the window, fastened my seatbelt, turned off my phone. The plane began to accelerate down the runway, and a strong pushback sensation pressed against me. Outside the window, the city lights rapidly receded, growing smaller and smaller, finally blurring into a distant sea of light. I remembered my family's gender preference for boys when I was little, and how I'd sworn back then that once I became successful, I would never return to that home. So I studied hard, striving to leave my humble beginnings behind. I thought my future would be an endless routine of working multiple jobs. So I have Marcus to thank. But from now on, he wasn't worth my staying for anymore. Goodbye, Marcus. The plane landed smoothly at Oslo Airport in the local early morning. In late autumn in Scandinavia, the air was crisp. Outside the window were a leaden sky and coniferous forests covered with a thin layer of frost. The fatigue from more than 10 hours of flying weighed heavily on my eyelids. I dragged my suitcase, following the flow of people out of the arrivals hall. The concierge for my book department was already waiting, holding a sign. The car drove away from the airport, and the scenery outside the window sped past, clean, expansive Nordic landscapes. Vast stretches of forest and lake, occasionally dotted with brightly colored small wooden cabins. It was truly beautiful. The apartment was a compact unit near downtown with floor-to-ceiling windows. The view was excellent, offering a glimpse of a distant fjord. The room had underfloor heating, dispelling the cold from outside. The concierge briefly explained the important details and then left. The world was silent. A massive jet lag and the disorientation of being away from my familiar environment washed over me. I threw myself onto the soft couch, staring blankly out the window. My stomach felt hollow and anxious, yet I had no appetite at all. Instead, a faint nausea churned within me. This feeling had surfaced faintly a few times on the plane. At the time, I thought it was just discomfort from the long flight. But now it was back. And clearer than before. A thought surfaced. My period seemed to be very late. Damn it, in those chaotic last days with Marcus, when he was so elusive, and Eleanor had returned, I had completely overlooked this. My heart sank. I practically stumbled up, rushing into the bathroom to rummage through my luggage. Fortunately, the pregnancy test kit in my regular medicine cabinet hadn't been thrown out. My fingers trembled as I tore open the packaging. Please, please, please don't let it be what I think it is. The few minutes waiting for the result felt endless. I leaned against the cold tiled wall, closed my eyes, my mind a blank. Time was up. In the white display window, two perfectly clear red lines. The sword hanging over my head had finally fallen, splitting me in two. How could it be such a coincidence? I had clearly put everything in order, ready to embrace a new life. Why was Marcus still haunting me? My thoughts were a mess. When? Was it that time he came back half-drunk, smelling of Eleanor's favorite cedar perfume? Or even earlier? The time when Eleanor had just returned, and he was so troubled? Keep it? Or? As soon as the thought reached this point, I immediately made a decision. No. I turned on the faucet and splashed cold water forcefully onto my face several times. A pale face stared back from the mirror. I needed to make sure I was sober and clear-headed right now. This child was connected to Marcus, but that was all. She is mine. Mine and Grace's alone. Once my mind was made up, I immediately picked up my phone, found the number for a highly rated local private obstetrics and gynecology hospital, and dial it without hesitation. The call connected quickly. The receptionist spoke gentle Norwegian. I calmly inquired about the appointment process in English. Hello, I'd like to schedule my first prenatal checkup. Yes, as soon as possible. Name? Grace. The appointment was set for 3 days later. I hung up the phone, and the room was still silent. Outside the window, under the grey Oslo sky, a few seabirds silently glided over the distant fjord. I walked to the huge floor-to-ceiling window, looking at this unfamiliar city. My chaotic heartbeat gradually calmed down. I placed my hand on my flat lower abdomen. Welcome to this world, Mommy is very brave, and I hope you will be brave too. Winter in Scandinavia was slow and quiet. My prenatal checkups went smoothly. Dr. Olson was a kind, middle-aged woman with a gentle smile. She told me in English that all my indicators were good, and my due date was in early summer next year. She asked if I needed to contact the baby's father. I shook my head, no, just me. The numbers on my debit card gave me enough confidence. I bought a small white house by a quiet lake in a picturesque community on the outskirts of Oslo. It came with a glass sunroom and a small garden. The house wasn't large, but it was cozy and bright. Pushing open the back door led directly to the sparkling lake and dense forest. I enrolled in a local language class. I also began systematically studying prenatal yoga and nutrition courses. I uninstalled all social media apps from on my phone, leaving only a blank WhatsApp. Occasionally, I'd use it to receive final settlement information from the real estate agent and the auction house. Marcus's name completely sank to the bottom of my contacts list, never lighting up again. My belly grew day by day, like carrying a little secret. The first time I clearly felt the baby kick, I was in the sunroom, relaxing on a lounge chair, reading a Norwegian picture book. The afternoon sun warmed my body. That gentle tea. Ouch, like a little fish blowing bubbles, made my entire body stiffen. A wave of warmth spread through me, and my eyes suddenly welled up. I carefully placed my hand gently over that spot. Soon, there was another, filled with vibrant energy. I lowered my head, my voice carrying a gentle, smiling tone I hadn't even noticed myself. Stella, you're quite strong. Because I was so excited for Stella, time seemed to speed up. Spring came late in Norway. In the forest, the snow cover melted, revealing fertile dark brown soil and tender green shoots. The lake thawed, reflecting the azure sky. One exceptionally bright May morning, my little world welcomed her earth-shattering cries. The labor wasn't too smooth, lasting over 10 grueling hours. The midwife placed the red, wrinkly little one on my chest. She was crying with all her might, her eyes closed. All my fatigue and pain melted away. I reached out a trembling finger and touched her warm cheek. She seemed to sense it, her cries softened, and her tiny mouth smacked. I choked up a little. Hello, my Stella. I named her Stella. Stella, meaning the light of dawn. Time seemed to be fast-forwarded. Feeding, changing diapers, burping, coaxing to sleep. The chaos of being a new mother was smoothed over considerably by the substantial numbers in my debit card account. I hired an experienced local nanny, Marion. She had the typical tall stature of a Nordic person and a gentle, patient nature, which was a huge help to me. After I recovered, I started exploring the city with Stella. Pushing her stroller, we strolled along the clean streets of Oslo. Went to the pier to see the colorful sailboats docked there. We wandered among the vibrant stone sculptures in Vigeland Park. Stella grew day by day, losing her newborn redness and wrinkles, her skin becoming fair. Her eyes, like two bright black grapes, sparkled with curiosity as she observed this new world. When she smiled, two shallow dimples appeared at the corners of her mouth. Occasionally, very occasionally. In the dead of night, looking at Stella's serene sleeping face, Marcus's sharply defined face would flash through my mind. Especially eyes, when she looked at someone intently, they were so much like his. A slight discomfort in my chest. But it was only for a moment. Soon after Stella's first birthday, Norway's long winter season began. The first heavy snow fell, transforming the entire world overnight into an immaculate white. In the afternoon, snowflakes were still falling outside. I held a freshly woken Stella, sitting on the living room carpet, building blocks. Firewood crackled in the fireplace, giving off a warm glow. The TV was on, tuned to an international news, serving as background noise. Stella's little hands grabbed a block, wobbling as she tried to stack it, making excited ah sounds. Suddenly, in the TV's background audio, the English news anchor seemed to mention a familiar name. I instinctively glanced up at the screen. The scene changed. It wasn't dull stock market charts, but a brightly lit ballroom scene. The camera zoomed in, focusing on a newlywed couple on stage. The bride wore a luxurious, floor-length wedding gown, her makeup exquisite, her smile radiant. It was Eleanor. The man she was arm in arm with was impeccably dressed in a suit, with an extraordinary demeanor, but it wasn't Marcus. I'd seen him in business magazines before. He was a scion from a deeply established family. The camera panned across the guests seated below. Marcus sat alone at a small round table. A glass of almost untouched wine sat on the table. The brilliant light from the crystal chandelier fell on him, making him appear somewhat solitary. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, his hair impeccably styled. But his entire being seemed drained of vitality, showing a deep weariness and emptiness. His head was bowed, his profile stark, his gaze vacant. All the surrounding noise and joy seemed irrelevant to him. Even through the screen, across thousands of miles, I could sense his unhappiness. That wasn't the formidable Mr. Marcus who commanded the business world. The host was explaining in English. Reportedly, the bride of today's grand wedding, Ms. Eleanor, previously had a high-profile relationship with Mr. Marcus, the head of Shin. And Marcus is attending as a special guest. Could he say a few words? The camera gave Marcus a close-up. He looked up at the camera. I'm waiting for someone. His voice was low, cutting through the TV screen and into my ears. My movements instantly froze. Stella seemed to notice my unusual behavior, tilting her small face up, her dark, grape-like eyes looking at me questioningly. She reached out a tiny hand and grabbed my shirt front, murmuring, "Ma. Ma." A suffocating pain welled up in my chest, followed immediately by an absurd clarity. Waiting for someone? Who does he think he is? Adam? Too bad he won't be waiting for her anymore. A person he treated as a replacement, used and discarded, then paid off. This remorseful, affectionate act now, who is it for? For the camera? Or for his own belated true feelings, which finally realized his stand-in had value? Thinking this, I quirked my lips into a mocking smile. Stella was still clutching my shirt front, her small face rubbing against me, full of dependence. Enough. Dream on. I picked up the remote control and unhesitatingly pressed the power button. The screen went dark, and Marcus vanished. I suppressed the emotions in my heart. Stella, sweetie, it's snowing outside. Shall take you to see the snow? I stood up and efficiently dressed Stella in her thick, soft white puffer coat, put on her fuzzy bunny ear hat, wrapped her in a warm blanket, and placed her in the spacious stroller. I also bundled myself in a floor-length puffer coat and a thick scarf, leaving only my eyes exposed. Pushing open the door, crisp air mixed with snowflakes hit me in the face. I pushed the stroller. Stella sat inside, obeying her little hands excitedly and babbling. I lowered my head, looking at my daughter's excited little face. In those beautiful eyes, so much like Marcus's, there was now only pure curiosity and delight for this world. Not a trace of shadow. I pushed the stroller, walking onward. That noisy, distant world was receding further and further from me. Marcus's epilogue wedding march tune was grand, resounding throughout the hall. The air was a mix of expensive perfumes, cigar smoke, and the rich, cloying aroma of carefully prepared food, but felt a little breathless. He sat in the corner, his back ramrod straight, like a stone sculpture forcibly seated in a chair. The amber whiskey on the table remained untouched since the beginning of the event. He watched the stage. Eleanor wore a wedding gown studded with scattered diamonds, breathtakingly beautiful. She was arm in arm with Alexander, her smile radiant. Alexander came from a prominent family, was young and promising, and looked at her with eyes full of love. The MC was rattling off cliches about a lifetime of happiness and a match made in heaven. Below the stage, thunderous applause erupted, mixed with laughter and blessings. Marcus's lips twitched, as if trying to smile, but it looked worse than crying. The area around his heart felt numb and hollow. No pain, no bitterness, not even a ripple. It was like watching a lavish play that had nothing to do with him. He finally realized that the so-called love which had once torn him apart and plunged him into despair, it had long since been utterly exhausted, first when Eleanor decisively left him years ago, and then through her calculating tests and relentless pressure after she returned to the. He remembered a time when Grace was sitting on the couch, looking at her phone. She had come across an interesting quote and read it aloud. That quote was, "The most potent thing about your one that got away is that even if they return, it's not the same. You've forgotten them, you've only forgotten your younger self. The most potent thing about your one that got away is that even if they return, it's not the same. You've forgotten them, you've only forgotten your younger self." The speaker had no ill intent, but the listener took it to heart. Marcus immediately thought of himself. At the time, he disagreed. How could he not be able to forget himself? He was absolutely convinced that he couldn't forget Eleanor, but proved her right. All these years, it had only been a mix of regret and obsession. After seeing her again, there was truly nothing left in his heart. They invited guests to give a speech. Alexander's side of the family and friends offered heartfelt blessings. Then it was Marcus's turn. He had been invited as a close old friend. All eyes in the ballroom turned to him, filled with scrutiny and curiosity. Some even wore expressions of anticipation, as if expecting a show. Eleanor watched him too, her smile still perfect, but her eyes betraying a hint of nervousness. Marcus picked up the untouched drink from the table and stood up. He walked to the stage, not taking the microphone offered by the MC, and simply raised his glass slightly. His voice was calm. "I wish you both a lifetime of happiness and a match made in heaven." With that, he tilted his head back and drank it in one gulp. "Additionally, I have one more thing to say. If she's watching, I'm waiting for someone." As his words hung in the air, the ballroom fell silent. Eleanor's smile froze, and a flicker of shock and humiliation crossed her eyes. Alexander's expression also turned subtly awkward. Marcus set down the empty glass, gave a slight nod toward the stage, and exited the ballroom. The door closed behind him, cutting off all the noise and pretense from within. The corridor was empty, suddenly quiet and cool. He leaned against the wall, closed his eyes, and took a deep breath. His lungs felt like they were suffocating, yet his mind was unusually clear. It was over. Everything related to Eleanor was finally over. But why did he feel so empty? Even emptier after finally letting go of his obsession with Eleanor? It was clear. The problem lay with Grace. Her image, uncontrollably, surfaced in his mind. The girl who had quietly stayed by his side for 7 years. Now, his mind was flooded with memories of him and Grace. Her guarded and bewildered look the first time he stopped her to get into his car. When she first learned to ride, she clumsily slid off the horse and he caught her. A blush rose to her cheeks, and her eyes sparkled. He took her to see the night view, and she pressed against the restaurant's massive floor-to-ceiling window, her eyes filled with wonder. She curled up on the couch in his apartment, reading books, the sunlight catching her hair, a picture of serene contentment. And then, that night he got drunk. He actually had an impression of it. He vaguely remembered calling out the wrong name, and then she abruptly pushed him away. He sank back onto the couch, his eyes hazy with drink. He only saw her barefoot silhouette as she walked to the window, slender and silent. He was too drunk at the time, only feeling annoyed, and passed out. When he woke up the next day, she was still preparing breakfast as usual, quietly, as if nothing had happened. And he, too, believed that nothing really had happened. Looking back now, her silence by the window then was the answer. So that's when things started to change, wasn't it? Her gaze no longer seemed to follow him. She remained docile and well-behaved. Whatever he gave her, she quietly accepted, acting sweet and appreciative as she thanked him. But he could feel that something was different. Her eyes, when they met his, no longer held any warmth. What was he doing at that time? He was immersed in his own world, preoccupied with Eleanor and overwhelmed by the company's expansion plans. He saw her quietness as being well-behaved, as obedience, even as summit king he was entitled to. So he continued to enjoy it, never imagining that one day she would completely disappear, until actually returned. He acted like a fool who had found something lost, his heart and mind consumed with making up for past regrets and proving himself. He subconsciously ignored Grace. He cancelled plans, forgot her birthday, and even when she texted him about a fever, he merely had his assistant send a perfunctory reply. He thought she would wait. Just like the past 7 years, quietly remaining where she was, so that no matter how far he went, he could always turn around and see her. He forgot that a heart can die. Eleanor, with a triumphant air, told him that Grace had taken the money and left. He felt only absurdity and rage. How dare she? What right did she have? She dared to open the golden cage he had built for 7 years with money and material things and fly away on her own? He frantically called her phone, sent messages, and went to the apartment to find her. But all he found was an empty apartment. A real estate agent was showing his place to unfamiliar buyers, pointing things out. And she, looking at him calmly, told him, it's over. She had sold off all their memories, making a clean break. The panic in that moment was far greater than when he had parted ways with Eleanor years ago. He finally realized what he might have lost. He used every connection he had to investigate. All he found was a one-way plane ticket to Oslo, Norway. Norway. Years ago, he and Eleanor had caused such a scene in that Nordic country. They were recorded by the local police and subsequently barred from entering the country. She chose that place. She did it on purpose. She wanted to completely disappear from his world, denying him even the right to search for her. He frantically contacted an immigration lawyer, desperate to find any way to overcome the visa denial. The answer was always the same. Unless the Norwegian government voluntarily revoked the travel ban against him, it was absolutely impossible. And a revocation? That was a pipe dream. He even pulled strings, reaching out to contacts in Oslo to try and find her residence. But a person with sufficient wealth, deliberately hiding in a foreign country, was like a stone dropped into the sea. Grace, and every trace of her existence, had completely vanished from his world after he himself had pushed her away. Mr. Marcus? Are you all right? His assistant's cautious voice echoed in his ear. Marcus opened his eyes. He found himself still leaning against the wall outside the wedding ballroom. At the end of the corridor, his assistant watched him with concern. He straightened up, ran a hand over his face, his fingertips damp. I'm fine. His voice was severely hoarse. He adjusted his tie and strode outside. Back to the company. Once inside the car, cut off from the outside world, he felt truly exhausted. He leaned back against the seat, closing his eyes. What flickered before his eyes was no longer Eleanor in her wedding gown, but Grace's last look at him. It was like looking at an irrelevant stranger. And her resolute back as she walked away. His heart ached more and more. It was too late. Everything was too late. He had personally let go of the person he loved. Outside the window, the city lights began to glow. A glittering metropolis, a gilded cage. Thank you for listening to today's story. If you enjoyed this video, please like and share it with your friends. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments section, so feel free to share your views, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more exciting stories. See you next time.